How's it going, everybody? This is Tobias Jones. Hope you're having another great day, and welcome back to another video. Alright, it's time for another edition of Bad Game Reviews. In this series, I'll talk about all the games that I have in my video game collection, whether it's for PlayStations 1, 2, 3, or 4, that I find to be insanely bad. And today, the unfortunate victim in this episode is Driv3r. Now, those that know me know that I am a huge fan of the Driv3r franchise. I've played all 5 of the games, and I really love the franchise, especially because of the storyline and just all the fun that you can have in this franchise. However, there's only one game out of the 5 games that I played in this franchise that I really despise of, and this is it right here. So Driv3r is obviously developed by Reflection Studios in Great Britain, and it was released by Atari in 2004 for the PlayStation 2 along with the Xbox and PC, and it really picks up where Driv3r 2 originally left off. It shows John Tanner and his partner Tobias Jones in Miami, where they find out about a car smuggling scene that's taking place, and really they find out soon that it is Charles Jericho who actually ended up murdering his own boss Solomon Kane to take over the lead of this. And so Tanner and Jones end up going in Miami along with a couple other areas in Nice and in Istanbul, so that way they can try to stop this criminals on the world and hopefully bring an end to this scene once and for all. It's also the very first game in the franchise in which you actually get to do some missions on foot here. There are some times where you get to come out of your car and also just run around a little bit, have yourself your own gun, and also just go after your own enemies, shoot after them, run around, try to find some certain objectives. And it does take a little bit of time to be able to adapt to this, but they were trying to go the Grand Theft Auto route, especially since GTA had something like this with many of their previous games, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. But this is the first time trying something like this, and so they were hoping to make this game a real success. Unfortunately, it did not turn out to be that way. In fact, out of all 5 of the mainstream games in the Driv3r franchise, this one is probably the very worst one out of all the 5. In fact, it's the only one of the 5 that I really do not seem to like. And the first reason why, and it's pretty obvious, the gameplay. For some reason, the cars here in this game are the hardest control out of all the 5 games that I played in this franchise. For some apparent reason, whenever I'm trying to get through a car chase or something like that, there's just a whole lot of problems with me trying to be able to control the car. And the next thing I know, whenever I'm in a turn, there's already another car, like a civilian car that's in front of me. I end up hitting them. Plus, as well, there's a lot of pedestrians that I have to try to avoid, and I'm not so lucky in trying to avoid those as well. And because of that, there are also some times where, because of the distances between, one area to the next that you have to get to, and the fact that you still have a timer on that you have to complete it by, unfortunately, there are some areas where they're so long where unless you're really lucky to be able to find a shortcut or two, it's going to be a very tough struggle for you to be able to complete a certain mission. And as a result, you may have to take multiple attempts so that way you can try to beat that particular mission. The other problem I have is some missions that are on foot, particularly those where sometimes you have to travel by car and then particularly end up going by foot, or maybe entirely by foot. For some reason, I do feel like sometimes that the missions take way longer to complete on foot as a result of some of those objectives. For some reason as well, whenever you're trying to shoot some of your enemies as well, for some reason, like the health bar that you have here, it just goes dramatically lower. In fact, a lot lower than Driv3r Parallel Lines, which also has this feature as well. And by the time I finally see someone, unless I'm really lucky, boom, I'm already dead. It's just a real problem to deal with. You're gonna have to do a lot of real searching around just so that way you can even try to find a health pack or two, just so that way you can be able to survive for the entire mission. And it's very scattered, like everywhere. It's gonna be very hard to be able to do that. And for some reason, there are a lot of glitches in this game. I don't know, development is really off in regards to this game, because for some reason in some of the missions, there was one particular mission where I was so close to completing it, and then for some reason there was this massive glitch that ends up taking place in the game, and all of a sudden I'm dead. Literally I have to restart the entire mission again. In fact, there are very few checkpoints in Driv3r as well, which really pisses me off as well. That combined with all the others that I just mentioned, and you get a gameplay where really it seems to be a lot harder than it should be compared to all the other Driv3r games that you play. Trust me, Driv3r 2 is slightly hard, but this one is even harder than that, and for some reason it should not be that way. Then you get the audio, and for some reason it just doesn't feel very, very good. In fact, for some reason the audio track, whenever you're driving in a car, you just get these random engine sounds. Like, it's literally the same exact thing whenever you're in a car or riding on a bike or something like that. For some reason it just doesn't feel like that you're actually out there on the streets going for a little joyride, or even going through a car chase or something like that. And a loud clang sound whenever you're crashing into another car or something like that. It's just like that loud or something like that. It's always the same exact thing. Like, it never changes. And as a result, it just feels like that, like all of that, and a lot of the gunshot sounds that you hear as well, it just really like rattles your ears a little bit. And unfortunately, that really makes it a much more distressing game than it should be. Not only that, the music that takes place in the background, it really doesn't feel right at all. I mean, it's mostly like instrumental audio tracks that you hear in the background, but like during those missions, it doesn't really feel like that it's actual crime video game music or something like that. I mean, usually you get some of that in Driv3r and the original Driv3r. Here it feels like it's just a little bit more mellow than it should be. It should be more like action-packed or something like that, and I just didn't really enjoy it. Now granted, I do enjoy the licensed soundtrack that takes place in between cutscenes or something like that a little bit, but the audio really, if you're going to have like background music during the missions, it really needs to be better, and I do feel like that the score of this game was really off as well. Trust me, a good soundtrack along with a good score can help make the game go a long way. I do not think that I did that with Driv3r, and in fact, out of all the scores that I've heard across all 5 Driv3r games combined, this one is probably the worst out of all of them. Then there are the graphics, and look, I don't really have too much of a problem with Driv3r's graphics along with the original Driv3rs because, for some reason, it's obviously late in the PS1's life cycle, and so obviously you're gonna get a little bit of stuff like that. But the graphics here, oh boy, they are ugly. I mean, the cutscenes, the graphics are really fine, but once you get into the actual gameplay of it, it almost looks like everything was just like copy and paste or something like that. I mean, the cars, they just do not look like they are real whatsoever. It's almost like they were like crafted like by pencil or something like that, or even by paper. And it just doesn't look like that they are actual cars that you can drive. Not only that, there's very a whole lot of damage that you really can see whenever you end up hitting something. I mean, you're lucky to even be able to get through an entire mission looking like you're in a stable car when really it should be a lot more damaged. And not only that, the faces of the characters, not only that, but just the way they looked outside the cutscenes. Oh boy, they look like that they are absolutely ugly. I don't know who was in charge of the 3D graphics and the animation in regards to like getting these characters all like set up into like 3D motion or something like that, but they did not do a very good job at that because as a result, they look like some of the worst that I've ever seen for actual characters that I've ever seen in a video game. It's a shame because they have like an all-star cast for this one. Like Mickey Rourke, Iggy Pop, Michelle Rodriguez as well. I mean, there was a lot of major all-star characters that are in this game, and for them to look like this as a result of the poor 3D and graphics and all that stuff, it really does a bad name to them. But yeah, obviously I do feel like they took a step up in regards to Driv3r Parallel Lines. I feel like they were slightly better than they were at Driv3r, but oh boy, I feel like this was a game that was rushed, and as a result, they probably did not do enough time to be able to handle the graphics. So I can't blame them entirely too much, but even then, you still gotta be able to make them perfect, and my god, they were not. In fact, not only that, all development was off as well. I mean, the fact that, like as I said before, Grand Theft Auto, that is probably the most popular video game franchise of all time, and I mention that because later that year in 2004, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was being released later that year, and Atari really wanted Reflections to finish that game long before then, so that way they can get ahead of sales. But again, even if that is the case, the game still needs to look like it's perfect, at least, well maybe not perfect, but at least good enough to make the gamers satisfied. Unfortunately, I feel like Atari's pressure on Reflections during that time really put a dampen on the mood in regards to Reflections' ability to be able to pull that off, because as a result, when this game came out, as I mentioned before, with the graphics, audio, and gameplay and all that stuff, it just did not look like it was finished whatsoever. It was all copy and paste from the past Driv3r games, and as a result, it just did not look neat at all. I feel like that's really on the fault of Atari here, because yes, you really want to do better than Grand Theft Auto, but really, it's rare anybody else better than Grand Theft Auto whatsoever, and really, you just gotta be lucky to be able to do that. In fact, it's very hard for anybody to be able to beat a GTA game nowadays. Whenever a GTA game comes out at all, you can highly expect that it's going to be the most successful selling game and most successful game reception-wise for that entire year. It's next to impossible sometimes to beat GTA whenever a game like that comes out every year. But Atari wanted to give it their best shot and try to get ahead of the sales and stuff like that because, I don't know, maybe they wanted to beat San Andreas or something like that, or maybe they knew that San Andreas was probably going to be better than this one, and so they really forced Reflections to get it out half finished as a result of that, but still, that's really on them. At the same time though, Reflections, this was not what I was used to seeing out of them. I mean, all the other Driver games that I played, they were all really, really good. You know, the graphics and the gameplay, they used to look very, very spectacular in all of them. I really do feel like that while I can't blame them too much for having to get this out on time or something like that, still, I do feel like that they shouldn't have been rushed the way they did, because really, even management of Reflections, they didn't do a good job at managing the whole entire thing, especially with all the pressure that was coming from Atari. But the worst part about this entire thing was what happened after the game was released, and that was, I like to call it, Driver-gate. And trust me, that was ugly. There were a lot of accusations that were going out that Atari was reaching out to magazines like PlayStation and Xbox and stuff like that, and basically paying them to write good reviews about this game, when the reality is this game is just bad. Obviously, there was very little evidence of that. In fact, I don't know if there's really any evidence of that at all, but it really did not do anything to help Atari and Reflections cover up for what was still an extremely bad game. And really, even if they did actually do stuff like that, and trust me, that would be very bad if it did. It really wouldn't have mattered anyways, because even the gamers that played the game themselves, they would notice themselves that this was not a game that was properly conducted whatsoever. Imagine though if that actually did end up turning out to be the case. Imagine if Atari actually literally forced gamer company magazines like PlayStation and Xbox and stuff like that to give them a positive review of this game, so that way they can cover up for all the bad stuff that was seen in this game. Trust me, I don't think we were seeing Driver Parallel Lines or Driver San Francisco or any of the handheld or, you know, like mobile PC Driver games that were released afterwards. It would have been the end of the franchise right there, and it probably would have been the end of Atari and Reflections as well. It would not have been pretty. Still, either way, it really did not help the fact that, you know, like, this was still a poorly developed game, and as a result, you get perhaps the worst game in the entire franchise, and as a result, a game that should have, even if it was not going to beat San Andreas anyways, which really it wasn't, it still should have taken more time to be able to polish up and be able to complete. And even if it was released alongside San Andreas, you know, just make sure that it was the best that it could possibly be. Atari really forced Reflections to do the exact opposite, and unfortunately, this was what you get. The Driver franchise, in my opinion, is one of my favorite video game franchises of all time because of all the intense action that you see in the games. You know, all the car chases, you know, the cutscenes with all the action, especially with all the interesting music that you hear as well. Trust me, there's a lot of fun that you can get in this franchise, and I really enjoyed mostly all of the Driver games. Now, Driver 2, it was a little bit difficult, especially, you know, like how hard it was at sometimes to try to be able to complete certain missions, but I still slightly enjoyed that one. But all the other games that I played in Driver franchise, I thoroughly enjoyed, especially Parallel Lines and San Francisco, which I played more of. But unfortunately, Driver 3, or in this case, Driver with the 3 literally in the middle of it, I really don't know why they even titled it this way. That may have been another fault of their own, but either way, it is still the worst game of the Driver franchise, and it's largely because of the poor development and all the controversy that was going on around this game. You know, all the time that, you know, like Atari was really forcing Reflections to get this game out ahead of Rockstar Games, so that way they could try to do slightly better, or at least get ahead of the sales before Grand Theft Auto San Andreas came out later that year. And I really feel like that as a result, it was a game that was really left unfinished as a result. The gameplay was bad, it had a lot of glitches in it, the music just really felt off, as well as the audio, and really the rest of the game itself, you know, like the controls, the graphics, and all that stuff, and even the voice acting as well. It just did not feel right whatsoever. In fact, that, you know, like, if you're going to have a game with an all-star cast and with mega implications to the result of the future of the franchise, really, it should have been a lot better than this. Unfortunately, that was the exact opposite here. Fortunately, Reflections was able to recover from this and put up a pretty good game with Driver Parallel Lines, and after their move to Ubisoft, Driver San Francisco, which, man, I really enjoyed that one. That's probably my favorite game of the entire Driver franchise right there. And so they were still able to pull off a successful franchise, even though they haven't been able to make a real mainstream game since that time. I really hope it does come back in the near future, because this was a game franchise that I really enjoyed it. Hopefully, we can see another run with John Tanner and the gang there in the Driver franchise, because that would be a lot of fun. But until then, while I will view them as a franchise that really changed the way we forever saw crime video games, this game was really the one blemish that they had. Driver 3 was a game that was unfinished and was just extremely bad, and as a result, it is another bad game that is in my collection. And so that's going to do it for this review. Driver 3 is just one of many games that I have in my collection that are probably bad, but also there are some other unique games that I have in there as well. So I would like to ask you, what other video games would you like for me to review? Whether it's good, bad, interesting, whatever you think. Let me know down in the comments below. I'll play it for a little bit, and hopefully I'll give a review on them as soon as I possibly can. Anyways, anyways, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. As always, if you'd like to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll know when my latest video is released. Comment below for future suggestions for all my videos, whether it's vlogs, projects, or challenges, you name it. Leave it in the comments below and I'll do my best to make them. As always, follow me on my social media. All the links are in the description below. That's going to do it for another video. I hope you're having another great day. As always, I hope to see you all again in another video very soon. And if you are a real fan of crime games, trust me, you might want to be really wary about picking this game up. So long, everybody.